Hey there, I'm Brandon, and this is the Dirt Church Devotional. So there's this really neat story in Mark chapter 4, starting about verse 35, where Jesus tells the disciples, hey, let's get in the boat, let's go to the other side of this lake. And as they get in, Jesus is tired and he falls asleep. He's in the bow or whatever, and he falls asleep. And they're getting across the lake, get maybe halfway across, and there's this huge storm comes up, and the wind is blowing, and the waves are crashing, and everybody's kind of panicking. And as it goes, some of the disciples went over and woke Jesus up and said, hey, aren't you concerned? Don't you care that we're going to drown? Jesus gets up, looks at them, yawns, stretches, goes to the end of the boat, and speaks to the wind and the waves and says, hey, peace, be still. And it is. I mean, the calm happens immediately. The waves stop immediately. The wind ceases. And he turns around and he looks at the disciples and he says, where was your faith? All right. And that's a great story. And I've heard a lot of sermons about, you know what, Jesus said, let's go to the other side. And when he says, let's go, you're going to go. And if he says, we're going to get to the other side, you're going to get to the other side. And I've heard, great messages about having our faith in God and really keeping our focus on Jesus. And those are all fantastic. But I was just thinking about this the other day, and bear with me. What about Jesus' faith? What was his faith in on that day? Now, understand, he was tired. He got in the boat and he laid down to go to sleep. Not worried about what else was going on. He wasn't worried about steering the boat. He wasn't worried about manning the sails. He wasn't worried about navigating. He laid down and went to sleep. And I know that there's somebody who say, well, Jesus was God, and so he knew what was going to happen. And let's not get over spiritual on it. And there's some that are going to say, well, Jesus, he knows that God's going to get him through, and he knows his Father's watching. Let's not get over spiritual about this. Again, track with me. It's my belief Jesus had faith in his disciples. Now think about it. 4 of those men were professional fishermen. Peter, James, John, and Andrew had made their living. They had grown up on the sea. They knew how to run the boat. They knew how to handle the sails. They knew how to handle the wind and the waves. And it wasn't their first rodeo. Having grown up and worked on it, they had certainly been in other storms. They had certainly weathered other times. And Jesus was confident enough in them that he trusted that they would be able to use their skills and their gifts to get him across the sea. Now, there's a couple of things. Number one, we have a tendency to look at ourselves and go, well, I don't have any really spiritual gifts. What I can do isn't real spiritual. I'm a machinist, or I'm a truck driver. I just crash motorcycles. Or what. Hey, whatever gift you have, God gave it to you. He knows that. And when he calls you and sends you, he knows that full well. Being a fisherman didn't seem like a real spiritual gift. Being a sailor didn't seem like a real spiritual gift, but it came into play. Number two, I don't think Jesus would have got into that boat knowing there was a storm coming, or not knowing that there was a storm coming, if all of his disciples were tax collectors, or if they were all, doctors or lawyers. But they weren't. 4 of them were sailors. They were fishermen. And here's another thing. I don't think it was one of those 4 that woke Jesus up. I got a hunch maybe it was Levi, maybe it was James. It was one of these guys that they were freaked out being out on the water anyway. It wasn't one of those 4. They were manning the sails. They were barking directions. They were telling bail water. They were doing everything. What's my point? My point is this. You might not think that your gifts or your talents or your skills are all that spiritual. But Jesus, again, I said this earlier, Jesus created you the way he did. He knows all about you. And he has faith in you to do what you can to accomplish what he has called you to do. So here's an idea. Have a little faith in yourself, have a lot of faith in God, and step out and exercise that faith, because faith is a verb. Chew on that. Talk to you next time.